session. My name's Ryan Platt. I know on the website it said we were going to talk about special needs planning, planning for two lifetimes, and an overview. And then on the breakout, it said we're going to talk about Medicaid waivers and everything you need to know. So I just wanted to ask some questions first. When you guys came to this session, is there anything specifically you wanted to learn about?
The Medicaid waiver.
Okay.
And financial planning for after we are gone.
So okay, so a little bit of both?
Yeah.
Okay, it's good. I can do that. We can adjust. Anything else? Or what else?
And what the difference between like DDSN and Medicaid waiver?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. What else? And how many people are in South Carolina? Gotcha. Everybody else in North Carolina? Okay. So different waiver programs. Similar, but not quite the same as we're looking at it. Okay. Well, good. So let's touch on, so we're going to do kind of a combo event as we walk through today. So ask questions, make sure I'm on target for what you came to learn about so I don't miss anything because this is your time. So I don't want you to be like, wow, that stunk. That guy was terrible. I always put this disclosure up, just, this is all very general information, so it's not specific to your family or specific advice. And I always like to set expectations of a session like this. And this is what parents have told me before. They're like, oh my gosh, Ryan, you just blew through a whole lot of stuff, and I felt like I was drinking out of a fire hose, right? So it's okay if you feel that way. Probably you should after this session. Our goal with the families that we serve is to try to corral the water hose, so to speak, and turn it into a trickling garden hose so that it's easier to digest and be able to understand and kind of make decisions, going forward. Some of the things I'm going to roll through here, pretty quickly. Obviously, you guys have a folder there. One of the things I do ask that you do, there is going to be an evaluation form in there. Please fill it out before we end, just so you can let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, what was helpful, what was not helpful, what you wanted more information on, what you didn't. We do webinars on all these topics throughout the year. I think we have 70 of them scheduled. We do Medicaid waiver webinars, ABLE accounts, special needs trusts, planning, building a support team. So we do all sorts of different educational items. And if you want to get notifications on those, just fill that form out at the bottom and put your email address on there. One thing I always like to give you an idea of when we think about special needs planning is just give you a definition of it. Then we'll dive into some of those details. Like I mentioned, probably go through some of this pretty quickly, because I know we only have about 40 minutes together. I want to make sure we kind of hit both of those areas, kind of planning, and then dive into the waiver programs as much as we can. So when we think about special needs planning, I think of it kind of an imagery of a target, right? The bullseye is why. Why would we do this kind of planning? What are we thinking about? And when we think about it, we think about a statement we call lasting independence for everyone. And that's the idea of this planning. It's lasting independence for everyone in the family, right? It's lasting independence for your loved one with a diagnosis, right? How do we get them to that point? What does independence look like for them? Because their definition of independence will be different from another individual. It will be different from other people in your family. And so how do we structure that, and what does that mean for them going forward? It's also about independence for parents, right? Because if parents don't have a sense of independence going forward for their lifetime, then it's going to be very hard to make sure that your loved one has independence as well. And then just talking out there to a few people earlier, this always comes up, especially as your child ages and gets older, especially if they have siblings, right? We talk about independence for the siblings. Because what we don't want to have happen is those phone calls that sometimes I receive, and it goes something like this. They call the phone, they're like, hey, Ryan. I said, yes. He said, I'm 50 years old. My brother's 53. My mom's already passed away, and my dad is living with my brother. And I have no idea what to do, and I don't know what the situation is going to be, and I have no sense of independence about it, right? So this lasting independence is really kind of creating, what does that vision look like for everybody in the family and everybody kind of on that support team, so to speak, whether it's now or whether it's 40 years from now, going forward, so that we always have an idea of what's everybody's role and responsibility, so that that independent vision can actually happen the way you want it to. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward, because the second kind of rim of the target is the how, right? Okay, well, how do we create that independence vision? Like, how do we create that going forward and develop it? And we call it your story, right? And so we have to know what are the elements of the story to figure out, okay, what does that independence definition look like? And then once we understand what that story looks like, and I'll describe to you the story on the next slide, then we gotta go to that third ring of the target, which is the what's, right? And the what's are all the action steps. The what's are Medicaid waivers. The what's are other government benefits. The what's are special needs trusts. The what's are a financial plan. The what's are the ABLE accounts, right? All these different pieces that we've probably heard of. The what's is guardianship. Do we do it? Do we not? Right? All the elements and all the decision making that has to take place that builds that structure that allows that independence to actually happen in the best way possible. Does that make sense? And so one of the things I'll just share with you is kind of the story. I always like, books like these. I'm kind of a nonfiction book reader. So I don't know if you ever heard of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but that second habit is kind of begin with the end in mind, right? So that's what we think about when we're creating this story. And if I put on a simple timeline, you can tell my PowerPoint ability is not advanced. It's unique, right? It starts with today and it goes to the end of your child's life. That's unique, guys. That's 85% of every other family on the planet doesn't plan that way. They plan till there. And if they have 3 kids and they die with $1, their favorite one gets 34 cents. Right? That's kind of, they're like, okay, there it is. Our planning is different. We've got a whole nother lifetime to think about. And how do we do that? Right? How do we think through that? Because since the planning is unique, the tools are going to be unique. And you're going to use them in a different way than other people might use similar tools. Right? The legal tools are going to be different. The government benefits are going to be different. So therefore, the financial structure has to be different to allow us to qualify for the government benefits. And using those government benefits are different. And so just the structure is unique, because only 15% of the entire global population has to think this way. Everybody else doesn't have to. So when we think about that, you really have, as you come back on this timeline, your retirement is very important when you're thinking about today. And we think about retirement, for our families, we think of it twofold. One is certainly financial, right? You need enough money for your lifetime and for theirs. So how do we do that? Again, because you're going here and your money has to last, where you decide to save your money today makes a huge difference in terms of where you have it located for your retirement, because of taxes, because of other tools you have to use. Let's say what's called a special needs trust. That trust works differently in the tax code than other types of trusts. So if all of a sudden you're saving all your money in a certain spot for your retirement, and that's how you're going to fund your child's future, there are some accounts that could get taxed as much as 40% when it goes in that trust, and you just lost 40% of it because you didn't know today what that landscape might look like out here, versus other things might be 0% tax when it goes in there. So all of a sudden we have 40% more money or we have 40% less. But if we don't know today how to do that, we could be sitting in that mistake out here. The other piece that we want to understand is Social Security. That's part of the government benefit, right? Medicaid waivers is one. Social Security is going to be another one. Again, Social Security is an interesting animal when you retire, because if your loved one diagnosed with autism, let's say they receive government benefits when they start at age 18, which there are certain government benefits that are going to be kind of 18 only. Things like SSI, supplemental security income. Things like Medicaid in general, like adult Medicaid. That's typically, for most families, going to be an age 18 event. Because at age 18, your loved one becomes their own legal person. And so the eyes of the law looks at them as their own person, and the eyes of Medicaid and SSI also does. So when they turn 18, the Social Security and Medicaid office looks at their income and assets only in qualification for some of these benefits, instead of looking at the parent's income and assets, which for a lot of families is why they can't qualify for some of these benefit programs, is because the family has more income than would qualify or has more assets. And we'll go over some of those numbers in a minute. The more assets in their name, so they can't qualify for some of these benefits yet. But age 18, as long as you structure your finances and your loved one's finances in a certain way, then they'll be able to qualify for these benefits. And if they receive this SSI, which is a monthly income stream, and they receive it really, what I would say, before the age of 22 to be safe, and all of a sudden you decide to retire, their benefits are then going to change based upon your selection of your Social Security retirement benefit. So when you're planning out here and you're planning your retirement and you're selecting, when do I want to take Social Security? You have to understand, well, your selection of Social Security will impact their income stream at that point, and it'll impact their income stream for the rest of their life. And so we want to understand that as you're making those decisions, right? So yep.
I'm sorry, you just said it would be impacted for the rest of their life. Is that even when we pass away? It's
Yes.
impacted?
So let me give you an example. And this is a very generalized example. It can change depending on spouses and work histories, but just give you an example. Let's say somebody's Social Security is going to be $3,000 a month. And if your child received SSI, let's say starting at 18 or 19 years old, they're considered what's called a disabled adult child in the eyes of Social Security. So they would qualify for what's called DAC benefits, DAC, disabled adult child. That's basically, don't take this as an exact quote because it can be a little bit different depending on each family, but about 50% of your Social Security, they would be eligible to receive as a benefit. It doesn't reduce your Social Security number, they just get an additional amount. So if your Social Security was $3,000 a month, they may be eligible to receive $1,500 a month. How is that different from SSI? SSI today is $1,000. So it could be that their income actually goes up when you retire. Or we might want to make sure that it does, which means that maybe, based upon the whole lasting independence for everybody plan, right, as I mentioned before, maybe that means, all right, well, maybe I have to delay my retirement so that then they have a higher level of income for the rest of their life, which allows more money to stretch longer over 2 lifetimes. Because when you pass away, right now the rules are, instead of 50%, they would then jump up to 75% of your number. So it can make a really big difference as we're thinking about that kind of planning. And I know for a lot of us that's not, in the immediate future. But it's good to kind of know, hey, what's maybe down the road as I'm thinking about, how do I think through all this stuff? Does that answer the question? Okay, cool. And then certainly, as you come forward, well, let me say this one too. And I know I'm harping on this stage. I don't mean to. It's only one stage. But I just want you to think about what we're thinking about with families as we start with today. And sometimes parents come to us and this is the time frame they're in. They're like, here we go. We want to retire. What do we do? Okay, yikes. But the other thing that we think about is retirement. And again, how is anybody's child older than 18? We're sitting here. Older? Great. And everybody else is younger? Hey, sharp, huh? Sharp. Man, figured that one out, huh? And so the other thing that we think about as parents' retirement is, when do you retire as the primary support person? Right? So as your children age, that will be a continued conversation that we have with our families of, when do we do that? What options are available? If they're not living with you, where are they living? What does that mean in North Carolina versus South Carolina in terms of different, housing options, living arrangements, organizations that try to help support that, right? And when do you do that? And making sure that we kind of talk through that support piece, because that's going to be really important as they age. And then we kind of keep backing up, right? In college, again, for everybody's under the age of 18, that could be your child with the diagnosis of autism. It could be if you have other children, you want to send them to college. Again, there are over what are called 400 Think colleges in the United States. Those are specific programs designed for individuals with a diagnosis. They could be 2-year programs, 3-year programs, 4-year programs. And we have a plethora of them in North and South Carolina. If that's something that you think your child will be interested in or will be able to be a part of. They're called Think colleges. So they're usually part of other colleges. So Western Carolina has a great 2-year program. They're focused more on independent living skills, employment skills. Winthrop, right down here in Rock Hill, has a fantastic program there as well. Clemson, South Carolina, App State, UNC Greensboro, College of Charleston. Some of them are 2-year programs, some are 3 years, some are 4 years, some work on a total degree, some don't, just depends. But again, maybe that's on your guys' storyline, right? Okay, well, how do we plan for that? How do we do that? And then this transition time period, that's kind of that, what I call age 17 to 24, so to speak. I know you said, I think your child's already 25, right? So you are in adult life right now. And so when we think about that 17 to 24, that's a lot of elements to think through, right? There's what's called guardianship. Do you become your child's legal guardian at age 18? Because again, in the eyes of the law, they become a legal adult. So they're able to make their own decisions, sign contracts, binding decisions, medical decisions. If they're still in school, and they're their own guardian, you won't be invited to the IEP anymore. They don't have to, because they can sign it themselves at 18. The school still might, but they don't have to. So you have to decide at age 18 is, do I want to stay in that parental role? Do I want to stay in that legal decision-making role? And there are advantages and disadvantages to it. It just really depends on, your guys' family situation and kind of where your loved one is at that point from an ability standpoint. One of the things that we always mention, and I'm not going to talk too much about this, Margaret on our team is doing a whole session on this at 2:30. But one of the questions she always asks families is, ask yourself when your child turns 18, what is their developmental age? Where are they developmentally, right? If they're 12, ask your next question of, well, would you let your 12-year-old make these decisions? And I know Margaret uses an example, and we've had a few of these that really came to light with COVID, is because we had a few of our families, their loved one with a diagnosis, got diagnosed with COVID. They were adults. They didn't have guardianship, and the hospital wouldn't let them in. So their child was, there by themselves. So that was one thing that, again, hopefully that's once in 100 years kind of event, I hope. But it just highlighted, you have to think about it. And you have to think about what's best for, where you guys are, and just the, all those different pieces of, guardianship. And like I said, the advantages, disadvantages. And then at age 18 is qualifying for certain government benefits. And then, certainly, I know I'm a pretty exciting guy up here at, 10:55 on a Saturday morning, God forbid something happens to you guys before we expect it to. What's the plan? What's the strategy? Is the structure set up the right way? Are they going to be able to continue to receive benefits? Are they not because they receive money in the wrong way and then those benefits are gone, right? Just what's the strategy? What I always say is we just want to make sure that the story still unfolds in the best way possible and the book's not burned in the backyard. So we just want to talk through it, which can be hard. Those can be difficult conversations to think, okay, if I'm not here anymore, what's going on, right? Who's doing the caregiving? What does that look like? Where is it happening? Who's doing the oversight? Those kind of things. And so, again, the reason that I always mention it is because I've been in our office with families and surviving spouses that we've already talked about it with both spouses. And it doesn't make it easy, but it makes it a little bit easier. And then I've been in my office, I've met the spouse for the first time without their other spouse. It just makes it a little bit harder. So what I always say is that's kind of the framing of the story. We want to understand it. And then through understanding what you want this story to look like, it's then, okay, let's kind of create that independent vision. And let's figure out what those whats are, right? So this is where we'll dive into some of those specific pieces. And I know we have 20 minutes, so you guys kind of guide me here also, right? So you have your story that we just talked about. Then we're going to fill this little piece in that kind of surrounds you guys, right? So this is the structure of what you want to have so that it supports your loved one and your family. And so finances are going to be important, right? And this can be, if your child's under the age of 18, it's your financial situation, right? It's your cash flow. It's where your money sits. If you have accounts for them, that's really important to understand. It's your insurances, it's your benefit programs, all those different things. If your child's over the age of 25, they might be receiving some of these government benefits already. So then it's understanding, well, what does their cash flow look like? They also might be working. We have quite a number of families who their loved one is working, at a part-time level. We have very few that are working full-time. Unfortunately, 85% of adults with autism are either underemployed or unemployed. Unfortunately, that's the stat right now. Hopefully that changes over time. So we have very few that are working full-time, but we do have some that are working part-time. And so if that's the case and your loved one's over the age of 18 and that's happening, then we need to understand what their income and expenses look like, so that we can make sure that they are putting their money into a location where they can keep this structure, especially if they're also receiving some government benefits along with some work dollars. And that's where we get to the government benefit piece, right? The government benefit piece, as I mentioned, can be an income stream when they get to be 18, typically, can be, adult Medicaid for health insurance purposes, but it can also be these waiver services. Right? So in North Carolina, the big waiver for individuals with autism is called Innovations Waiver. There's a really long wait for that, 10 years, 12 years, 13 years. And that can sound very daunting, maybe is a word. Unenthusiastic could be, there you go. Impossible, right. And then in South Carolina, you have, DSSN, kind of waiver, which is similar to the Innovations waiver. But then in South Carolina, you have TEFRA for under the age of 18, which is great. They don't have that in North Carolina. And, for TEFRA, you can get pretty much right away, which can provide, different services. I know the other waiver in South Carolina is a wait as well to receive. But when I think about either one of those waivers, not TEFRA, but the other one in South Carolina in the Innovations waiver, I think about them really for adult life. So it's okay. I mean, not necessarily okay that there's a long waiting list, but I really think about it for, adult life purposes. And here's why. Is it provides a lot of daily life supports, depending on what your loved one's needs are. So it could provide resources for a day program. It could provide resources to help them at a job be successful. They call that supported employment, or have a job coach that helps them interview skills, helps them with finding a job, helps them on the job. We actually had a young lady work for us for a while, and she would come with her job coach. She worked 15 hours a week. The job coach we trained the job coach, and then the job coach trained this young woman, and she came every day with her for about six months. Make sure she knew what she was doing, how to do it, those kind of things, and then she knew that, and then she didn't have to come every week. So it was a one-on-one in a job situation, and that was provided by her waiver program. So all these waivers, regardless of what state you're in, when your child's name comes up, does anybody have the waiver yet? Anybody have one of those? No. Yeah. You're in the wait list, right? Long, I know. But what happens is when your name comes up, obviously they go through basically a evaluation, and they score your child based upon where they think their abilities are, and provide you a budget of resources and services. And so those services could be, helping to pay for communicative devices if your loved one needs help in that respect, in terms of communicating. If they don't communicate verbally, but they can communicate in another way, and there are communicative devices, that could be part of their budget, where that service would pay for those things. It could be that transportation, right? For some people, there can be a budget for some level of transportation services in there. It could also be, they're connected to what is known in that industry as a DSP, or direct support professional. So you're connected with a service provider in your area, and then that service provider hires these one-on-one folks that might come in and help your loved one learn how to navigate the grocery store, learn how to make a grocery list, go to the grocery store with them, teach them how, the outside of the grocery store is healthier than the inside of the grocery store, so to speak. Help them check out of the grocery store and teach them those kind of things. There's also what's called supported living, right? We talked about, when do you retire as the primary support people? Well, there's also things in these waiver programs called supported living, which helps them find a living situation that fits for them. So it could be a roommate situation where they have an apartment. They maybe have two individuals with autism, and then a worker, or the company itself would have kind of the third bedroom, so to speak, and they might have people flow through that bedroom, right, to make sure there's coverage, to make sure they're safe. Depending on their ability level, it might be that neither one of those individuals needs somebody 24 hours a day, but they need somebody just to check on them, 4 or 6 hours a week, make sure they're cleaning their apartment, make sure the dishes are done, make sure the shower is taken care of, make sure they're handling their personal hygiene, combing their hair, brushing their teeth, right? And they come check on them maybe once a day for a few hours, right? It's all dependent on your loved one's ability level. That's why they do that initial assessment, to determine what kind of budget are we going to need. And those budgets typically are somewhere between $0, which obviously that means you don't get it, right, to about $140,000 worth of services in a year. Kind of how that budget is. Now that 140 is basically 24 hours, 7 days a week need of somebody being there caring for them. So when we think about that 10 to 12 year wait, yes, it's a long wait, but I always think about, okay, well, let's just say that you got a $60,000 budget a year for services. And let's say your loved one got that at age 25, and they had that for the next 40 years. Do the math on that. That's $2.4 million of tax-free resources that your family doesn't have to come up with to help provide those supports. That also allows families to continue to work. And then there's also programs within, especially now after COVID, but even before COVID, but that allows relatives to provide some of those services. So for a lot of families, because we see this a lot, that a lot of times it's hard for two parents to work and care for either one loved one with autism and other children, or some families we have that have two children that are diagnosed, right? So a lot of times it's hard for both parents to continue to work. So many times what happens is this waiver comes in and one of the parents can actually become the direct support professional. So they could take the hours that is helping to work on the goals for their loved one, and then they're making an income. And so they're receiving that income, and that income is also tax-free. So it can be an economic benefit to the whole family depending on what your situation looks like and when you start to receive those services. So one of the things we always say is you always want to make sure that you're on the list. As impossible as it, I know, right? I hear you. Because it's also not necessarily a golden ticket either, because those service providers that when you do receive the waiver, those service providers are also trying to find the people to do the work. And that can be a challenge as well, especially depending on, where you live, is also one of those pieces that it's going to be dependent on in terms of, who the service providers are, how many direct support professionals they have on staff, what does that look like, so that, are they going to be able to staff families? And so that's one of the reasons why we have a lot of families who do have family members doing the work. We have some where their older siblings will come back from college, and they'll be like, and they're already approved by the service provider to do the work, so they'll take the hours with their sibling, and they'll work with them so that they have those services going forward. So again, and there's also respite care involved in that as well. So you get a certain number of respite hours through these waiver plans. Also, that can just help give everybody some time apart, which can be a benefit. But in order to do that, oh, I already had that number up there. They have to keep their assets under $2,000. So if your loved one has more than $2,000 in their name, like checking accounts, savings accounts, bonds, like savings bonds, custodial accounts, anything like that, then 529 is actually okay. Yeah, because you own it. They don't actually own it. There still might be a better place though. Right? And the reason I say better place is because it can be more flexible, right? And that's going to be, well, I'll show you in a minute. Because there's really only two places that your loved one can have money and be safe from continuing to receive all these government benefits, right? Either the waiver benefits and resources, or the income stream of SSI, or the adult Medicaid for health insurance purposes, is a special needs trust and what's called an ABLE account. An ABLE account is one of those accounts that your child can actually own themselves in their name, right? So that's a little bit unique. It's actually written in the same area as the 529 area of the tax code. Some people call it a 529 ABLE because it sits in that area of the tax code. But it's more flexible than a 529 plan. 529 is a college savings plan or education savings plan. And we have a lot of families that start those. And then they're like, oh man, they're 13. I don't think it's going that direction. I'm not sure. So what do we do with that money? Well, one of the rules with ABLE accounts, because it sits in the same area as the tax code, is you can start transferring money from a 529 into the ABLE. And the ABLE is what I say more flexible, is because you can use it for basically anything that they need. So if they do go to college, you can use it for that. It comes out without any taxes, right? So you don't have to pay any taxes on the money. But you can use it for buying them a computer someday, or buying a phone, or going on vacation, or whatever is specifically for them. You can use this account, right? So there's only two places that they can have more than this $2,000 number and keep these government benefit services, when you do get them, hopefully. Yes. How many years have you guys been waiting? I know. It's really not until you get the call and you're like, okay, because you don't even know, right? 5 years from now, what are they going to need from those benefits and those services? Because there's a whole list of the services that you could get. It's just, are they going to qualify for them or not? When they get to that point, depending on their developmental stage and where they are and what they need. But it's a wide range of benefits that open up. So stay strong. Yes, please.
What's a special needs trust?
Yeah.
And could grandparents open it up for their grandchildren?
Yes. Yep. So a special needs trust, similar to an ABLE account, where your child can have access to more than $2,000 and keep all their benefit programs. But a special needs trust, you have to have an attorney write it up because it has to be written with specific language. South Carolina, you need an attorney that's barred in South Carolina and that does special needs trust. North Carolina, same thing. You need a North Carolina attorney that's barred here to make sure they write it in the correct way. Yes, anybody can open one up. I'll kind of skip through this. I know we have like 2 minutes. So what we would say is there's 2 ways to set up these kind of trusts. It's called inter vivos and testamentary. Inter vivos means it's alive today. So that's kind of, I think, the one that you'd be thinking about, right? If grandparents want to put money in it. Testamentary means the trust lives in some other legal document, meaning it might live in your will or in a revocable trust. If it lives in your will, meaning there's language that says this is a special needs trust, this is where I want my money to go for John, it doesn't exist until you no longer do, right? In that testamentary way. Inter vivos means it's a standalone trust. It's its own document. If you sign that one, it exists today. You can get an EIN number, which means it needs its own social security number, basically, called an EIN. And then you can open an account. Anybody can put money in it. So grandparents can put money in it. You can put money in it. Aunts, uncles, anybody. And it's also there and ready. So if something does happen to you, you can already communicate to people, hey, we have this special thing set up for John. This is where his money needs to go, or else he could lose access to all these other services, even though if he doesn't have them yet. These are what they are, and they could be worth millions of dollars. This is why we don't want to mess this up. And so you can have that trust set up, and you can do it now and get it all ready. And then grandparents could add money to it if they wanted to, right? Which is great, because you can fund it in a lot of different ways, right? You can fund it with lump sum payments, especially grandparents. Usually parents, I say you probably don't want to fund it with a lot of money right now, just because, parents have to pay for what? Everything. Thank you. Right. Once you put money in this special needs trust, it can only be used for the benefit of your loved one with autism. That's it. Right. So if the roof starts to leak and you put all your money in here, you can't use it. Right. So for parents specifically, usually we want to keep your money available to everybody because you got to pay for everything. So typically later on in your life, do we look at, hey, when do you fund it? How do you fund it? Those kind of things. But if grandparents want to fund it, then maybe they fund it with, put $5,000 in there or $200, I don't know, or $5 million, I don't know, whatever their situation is, God bless them, They could do any of those things, right? It'd be like, yeah, that'd be awesome. I don't know about that one, but and then the other piece with a trust is you have to decide who the trustee is going to be. Trustee is the decision maker. So you know how we all have checking accounts? We're the decision maker of our checking account because we own it. The trustee is the decision maker of any of the assets inside the trust. So they decide how it's managed. They decide to do a tax return. They decide, if they're going to buy real estate in there, if they're going to buy Apple, whatever.
So it doesn't need to be the person that opens it.
No. And typically it will be, let's say you as a parent open this standalone one, you would be the trustee today, and then you're going to have a successor trustee in case something happens to you, right?
Now, let's say we don't have another person after we were to pass away.
Yep.
Can we then have an attorney take over with
Yep.
taking care of all?
Absolutely. And so that's typically what we recommend, because typically family members are not going to know what the distribution rules are because they've never managed one before, and they probably don't even know where they're located. Because I've asked families that question. I said, are you going to have, and they say, yeah, my brother's an attorney up in Philadelphia. I'm like, great. Has he ever managed a special needs trust? No. Does he know where the rules are? No. How successful do you think he's going to be? You're like, Ryan, just burst my bubble again. I hate you. And I'm like, well, make him the trustee anyway. Because one of the things I always talk about a trustee is, number one, they should know your child. They should know who they are, what they need, what their life looks like. And that's best if it's a family member, if that's possible. But give the family member help. Give them a co-trustee, an administrative trustee, somebody who knows the rules, right? And I don't sound self-serving sometimes when I say that out loud, because that's part of what we do for families. We help a lot of family member trustees manage it.
Can you set it up as like an annuity for their lifestyle? Something that they can figure out in 20, 30 years?
You can. So you can fund a trust with just about anything. You can fund it with annuities. You can fund it with life insurance. You can fund it with stocks, bonds. We can fund it with real estate. Some families put rental real estate in there as owned by that to provide an income stream. So it's really wide open. It just depends on your family's situation and what that looks like as we start planning in terms of how do you fund it, what's the best way. And usually it's the combination of a number of different things. It can. Yep. So it'll gain interest on its own. It's basically just a wrapper for whatever. Basically, a trust can own just about anything we can own, right? It can own real estate. It can own individual stocks. It can own an annuity. It can own life insurance. It can basically own any financial instrument. It can't open up its own IRA because that's a retirement account and the trust doesn't retire. So, but it is, able account, similar but different. I know I'm running out of time. I always do. So, because I have to stop. But there is an annual funding limit for able accounts. So you can only put 19 grand a year in it as of this year. Special needs trust, there's no limit. So for this situation that we're talking about right now, special needs trust, larger sums of money, able accounts, smaller amounts of money. And anything your loved one's earning, they should save their money in an able account. They never want to save their money in a special needs trust, which is really an important distinction.
Can you access the money from the able account in the event of unforeseen circumstances?
As long as it's for them. Yes. Yeah.
Somebody's got to make a decision on whether or not
Yeah.
that's legitimate use of the
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. We had a family several years ago. We're managing a trust for a special needs trust for them, and they were like, Ryan, our daughter's a runner. Right? So you open up the back door and she just wants to go. And so we want to put a fence around our property. We wouldn't do it unless it was for her. Can we use the money from the special needs trust to do that? And I said, well, not at 100%, because the fence also provides value for the other people living in the house, and it adds value to the property that that person doesn't own. So as we did the calculation, we felt it was safe to pay for 20% of the cost of the fence from the trust, and the parents would have to pay for the other 80%. And because we felt we could argue at Social Security if they ever came back that was reasonable. So sometimes it's that. It's going through, hey, what's going to be a red flag versus what's going to be a, light orange flag. Yeah. Yeah. Right, yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's leaking on their head while they're sleeping. That's right, exactly, yeah. Depends when Social Security comes to investigate. No, and I know we went over, guys. Sorry about that. But if you do, again, we do these online, web. If you want to fill out that evaluation form, we can get you on that email list. We don't bombard you. But if it's also something that you guys want to talk about or have a 30-minute phone call about just what we do and how we serve families, you can put that on the evaluation form also, and we can have a conversation. So as I mentioned, tax strategy is going to be important. because you don't want to lose 40 to 50% of the money you put in the trust by using the wrong asset in there. And then certainly, communication, right? We want to communicate to everybody what you did so that they don't make any mistakes, right? We don't want grandparents leaving money in the wrong way if you've set something up so they don't have to. So sorry, I know I went through that really fast. So, no. Thank you guys for coming. Yeah,
Quick yes or no question.
please.
I have a special needs trust that was set up in Nevada.
Yeah.
Do I need to update it to here since we're now residents here?
Does it have money in it yet?
Not yet.
I would update it, yeah. And that's the benefit of if you set it up and then get the EIN and open an account and you move, you don't have to redo it because it's already open and ready to go.